The rise of the Medici family dynasty begins with the 1397 founding of the Medici Bank in Florence, Italy. The Medici family came from the agricultural Mugello region in Italy, which is located north of Florence. During the 13th century, the leading Italian banking center was Siena, Italy, but in 1298, when one of the leading banking families went bankrupt, it gave the opportunity for Florence to become the leading banking center in Italy. At first, the Albizzi family was the leading banking family in Florence. However, they were challenged by the Medici family, who now had built the Medici Bank into being the largest bank in Europe. Cosimo Medici, one of the heads of the House of Medici, was exiled by the Albizzi family in 1433, but then, a year later, a pro-Medici government was elected and allowed for Cosimo to return. They allowed him to return because when he and the Medici left Florence, so did their power and money, causing a mass exodus of people and money from the city. This marks the start of a 3-century status of the Medici family as a leading banking family in Florence and exerting enormous control within and outside the city. The Medici family maintained their grip on power through marriage, maintaining a strong position in social networks, and a profitable monopoly of the mining of alum in Europe. One of the most lasting legacies of the Medici family was their extensive patronage of the arts. Giovanni Medici was the first patron of the arts in the Medici family. He sponsored Masaccio and commissioned Filippo Brunelleschi for the reconstruction of the Basilica of San Lorenzo in Florence. Cosimo the Elder was a patron for Donatello and Fra Angelico. Michelangelo was also sponsored by the Medici family, and he produced work for numerous Medici family members. He was a favorite of Lorenzo the Magnificent, who often invited the young Michelangelo to study ancient sculpture in the Medici family collection. Lorenzo the Magnificent also sponsored Leonardo da Vinci for 7 years. Some of the most famous artwork the Medici family commissioned include Raphael's Transfiguration and Michelangelo's The Last Judgment. Even Galileo Galilei was a patron of the Medici family, and he tutored several generations of Medici children. The Medici family offered Galileo Galilei a safe haven from his enemies on multiple occasions, and Galileo even named 4 moons he discovered around Jupiter after Medici children he tutored, even though that name isn't the one we use today. Lorenzo planned his children's careers carefully for them, and his son Giovanni was placed in the church from an early age. Giovanni would go on to become Pope Leo X. Another Medici-born pope was Pope Clement VII. As pope, they were the political rulers of Rome, Florence, and the Papal States. Both popes were patrons of the arts. Pope Leo X commissioned works from Raphael, while Pope Clement VII commissioned Michelangelo to paint the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel. Pope Clement VII's pontification was marked with events that shook the power of the Church, such as the 1527 sack of Rome by the armies of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, and the growing prominence of the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther. Leo X's extraordinary spending of money emptied Vatican coffers and compiled massive debts. Cosimo I of the Medici family became the ruler of Tuscany through fighting against Catherine Medici and Paul III, conquering Florence's hated rival, Siena. Cosimo I's son, Francesco, had a daughter, Marie de' Medici, who then went on to become the Queen of France and Navarre. Through Marie, all succeeding French monarchs, excluding the Napoleons, were descended from Francesco, and therefore had the blood of the Medici family. Cosimo I's son, Ferdinando, assumed rule of Tuscany after Cosimo I's death. An old man who lived through the time of Ferdinando ruling Tuscany, Italy, might look back at the time of Ferdinando's rule and think something like,
"Well, he drained the marshes. That made things easier, because then it helped prevent the spread of disease, and it had more land for people to build on. Speaking of building, he built roads. This helped transportation and helped the service of goods go throughout the areas of Italy. That helped our economies, really built it up. He also planted mulberry trees. Now I know what you're thinking, mulberry trees? What's the use of mulberry trees? Well, mulberry trees are actually help with the production of silkworms. And he also helped create a Franco-Tuscan alliance, really helping elevate the place of Tuscany in world affairs. And you know what that man even did? He even sponsored a Tuscan expedition to the New World with the intention of establishing a Tuscan colony. It might have failed to create any permanent colonies for Tuscany, but it was still a great achievement for the region and helped secure our place greater in the world. So, yeah, I would say Ferdinando was a good ruler for Tuscany.
In 1705, the Medici family lacked male heirs and was virtually bankrupt. In comparison to the 17th century, the population of Florence had declined 40%. Cosimo III tried to negotiate with European powers to help the position of Tuscany, but its complicated legal status undermined his efforts. Other European powers chose an heir for Tuscany, which the Grand Duke Cosimo said he only had the right to choose, but his protests were unheeded, and he ended up dying. Anna Maria Luisa signed the Patto di Famiglia in 1737, where she willed the personal property of the Medici to Tuscany, provided that nothing was ever removed from Florence. And then there was the extinction of the main Medici dynasty in 1737. Today, the legacy of the Medici family can clearly be seen in museums around the world, such as the Uffizi Museum in Italy, where the works donated and collected and sponsored by the Medici family can all be found through the donation of Anna Maria Luisa when she signed the Patto di Famiglia. These works of art are considered priceless and some of the most famous works in the Italian high and mid-Renaissance. Ultimately, the lasting legacy of the Medici family in Europe wasn't their banking prowess, but instead it was their artistic patronages that created numerous priceless art from the Italian Renaissance, from the works of Michelangelo to Raphael to Leonardo da Vinci, and even sponsoring scientists such as Galileo Galilei. Without these works, the world would be profoundly different, and it is for that legacy that the Medici family is best remembered, not for their money, but for the art and creativity they brought into the world and that we can still experience today.